Hi, happy hump day. Today is Wednesday, November the 18th, a week from tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and let's get started. Again, actually, I've been inspired by a lot of people, friends on Facebook have gotten out their Christmas decorations. And since this has been kind of a crappy year and we need some festivities, I've started to take out my Christmas decorations. I have the stockings in the chimney. I have I have a whole big nutcracker collection out here, and I kind of want to find a tree lot and get a tree in as soon as possible. I just wanted to have that Christmas smell of a real tree. I love real trees. So I don't know if all you guys are inspired to get your Christmas stuff out. My Christmas stuff is out, and I need a tree ASAP. Here's the rain. Here's a forecast. Of course, it's going to rain. Hey, Saturday. So maybe on Saturday we'll get a tree since it's going to be partly sunny, mostly cloudy. Um, it's the regular fall forecast for Seattle. Okay, we're going to get into the news. Christopher Krebs, who was actually the head of the Department of Justice Election Integrity Division, was focused on making sure that we had free and fair elections. He basically came out with a statement, and he had actually a website that dealt with rumors about election fraud. And he came out and said, we probably had the most legitimate and most fairest and most uh, fault-proof election in our lifetime. And Trump fired him because he was too honest, because obviously that's going against everything what Trump's saying about the election. So let's see what happened to Christopher Krebs for him being honest about the honest election.
There has been another major shakeup in the federal government tonight. President Trump, while denying his defeat, has just fired Chris Krebs, who is the director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He has been credited by many for securing the U.S. elections against domestic and foreign interference. To help us now understand what may be behind this latest move, our Nick Schifrin is back. So hello again, Nick. Remind us who Chris Krebs is and what his job was.
Yeah, Judy, Krebs was a kind of election czar. He was one of the country's top cybersecurity officials. He took the intelligence community's materials that they gathered about overseas interference and passed that on to local officials. He also ensured domestic voting equipment was secure, and he took domestic disinformation as well head on. He received bipartisan support, Judy, as you just said, in the days after the election, that he and his team succeeded at securing the election. But tonight, the president has tweeted this, and I'm going to read the whole thing for you. The recent statement by Chris Krebs on the security of the 2020 election was highly inaccurate, in that there were massive improprieties and fraud, including dead people voting, poll watchers not allowed into polling locations, glitches in the voting machines, which changed, votes from Trump to Biden, late voting, and many more, therefore effective immediately. Chris Krebs has been terminated as director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Judy, to be clear, the president is misleading the public, and he is misinformed about the election and what his administration did in order to secure it. The president is referring not to a statement by Chris Krebs personally, but to a statement by not only his agency inside the Department of Homeland Security, but the National Association of State Election Directors, the Election Assistant Commission, the National Association of Secretaries of State. Pretty much every single person involved in the election made a statement that the president is criticizing. And I should also add to that list Cyber Command, which defended the elections from foreign interference, also said that they succeeded at protecting these elections. And Judy, just in the last few minutes, Chris Krebs has tweeted, honored to serve, we did it right, defend today, secure tomorrow, hashtag protect 2020.
And we should also mention our own William Brangham reported early in the program. He talked to election officials across the country, both political parties. They all said there was nothing untoward in this election. It's one of the most secure elections they've ever been involved in. So, Nick, just to understand this, You've been reporting on this, and Chris Krebs was expecting that something like this might happen. Is that right?
Yeah, so late last week, he began telling officials that he would be fired, and other officials told other people who told journalists like me that he was expecting to be fired. And what led up to that was a site called Rumor Control. Now, this was a site born to essentially combat domestic and foreign disinformation before the election. And what Krebs and his team decided to do was use the site to refute post-election disinformation, most of which came from the president himself, as well as the president's allies, including Rudy Giuliani. And some of Krebs's posts and tweets on that Rumor Control website had a little fun. He called one of the conspiracy theories that the president suggested happened during the election nonsense, and used an emoji to describe it. And after that, I was told that White House personnel targeted him, targeted all of his work, to the point that independent cybersecurity officials archived the Rumor Control site and archived his work to make sure, just in case the White House didn't pull it down. So the bottom line is, there is bipartisan agreement that Krebs was successful, and the 50 states that believe they were successful, that is what the president is attacking today.
So, and again, the bottom line is he was doing his job in keeping elections secure, and for that, the president has fired him. Nick Schifrin back on the program to report on this very late-breaking story. Thank you, Nick.
Oh, God, I can't wait till Trump leaves. Oh, my God, here he is, someone that's telling the truth, and he fires them. That's definitely what's been happening. What the worst presidency in the United States history. Thank goodness we only have less than 65 days left. This is a really interesting story. A year after the virus appeared, Wuhan tells China's pandemic story. So here's a really good story from PBS NewsHour about where it all started a year ago.
1 year ago today, the first known case of coronavirus infection was recorded in China's Hubei province, home to Wuhan, now known the world over as the original virus epicenter. Special correspondent Patrick Falk went to Wuhan to try and piece together parts of the puzzle and see how China is shaping the story of what happened there.
It's hard to imagine this place was once on the front line of China's coronavirus outbreak. Jinyintan Hospital in the north of Wuhan treated some of the world's first COVID-19 patients nearly a year ago. Few cars or even people come in and out of the premises now. In the early days of the outbreak, wards here were bursting. Just a short walk around the corner from the hospital, authorities converted this expo center into a shelter to treat the sick. Wuhan was the hardest hit place in China, accounting for more than half of all the country's cases and the bulk of its officially reported roughly 4,500 deaths. The center is now housing an exhibition commemorating China's battle against the virus.
I think pride belongs to every one of us Chinese because we have successfully fought against the coronavirus under the call of the party and the country, and actively fought against it under the leadership of the government.
This is an audio-visual journey that details Chinese Communist Party-led efforts against COVID-19, complete with a timeline of events, according to Chinese authorities, of how they unfolded. There's a tribute also to medics who died fighting the outbreak, including Li Wenliang, the whistleblower doctor silenced by officials for trying to warn the world about the disease and whose death sparked outrage. Anger over his fate and a perceived cover-up in the early days of the crisis has been turned into a story of sacrifice by a national hero. It's the story of Wuhan the government wants to tell.
This behind me is what's left of the Huanan wet market, what many people believe to be the source, the original source of COVID-19. There are no businesses operating inside anymore, and many of the other businesses around the outside, including eateries in particular, remain shuttered as well.
Filming here is not welcome. That's despite there being little to see. People used to sell everything from live animals to seafood at this market. There's barely any sign now that it ever even existed. Scientists believe the virus may have originated in bats and that it was passed on to humans via another animal species. But there are doubts about whether this is where the outbreak began. Although many early cases were linked to the market, no animal here was identified as a source of infection. Lai Yun owns a Japanese restaurant in Wuhan. He lives close to the market and before the outbreak used to buy some of his supplies there.
Hubei is not a province that likes to eat wild animals. There's no such thing as bats as mentioned on the internet. Certainly not.
If true, that would seem to rule out the possibility of any jump from bats, at least in Huanan market. Chinese scientists have also backed away from assertions they made previously that the market may have been the source of the virus. Meanwhile, Beijing's resisted global pressure to allow outsiders access to get to the bottom of its origin. In May, months after the first case and the virus exploded worldwide, President Xi Jinping endorsed a World Health Organization-led investigation. Reports say a two-person team from the WHO came in July, but they never went to Wuhan during the entire three-week trip. To date, there's still been no independent probe on the origins of COVID-19 conducted from China's outbreak epicenter. Dr. Bruce Gillen is president of Global Immunization at the Sabin Vaccine Institute and regular consultant to the WHO. He says it's now too late.
Looking at something 6 months later, it may be hard to reconstruct it. So these kind of investigations need to be happening as quickly as possible. Getting the teams in there that know how to do these as quickly as possible to understand what's happening and to unveil any evidence that may be there.
The lack of access given to outsiders has raised doubt over China's commitment to identifying the source of the virus. It's also helped fuel alternative theories, including the possibility that it might have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which had been conducting research on coronaviruses. There's no known evidence to suggest that happened. Professor Ivan Hung is chief of Hong Kong University's Infectious Diseases Division. He says he thinks the criticism of China is unfair.
The thing that you can probably comment on is the local government in Wuhan. Then probably they have not been very responsive, and of course they probably has cleaned up the market before they're able to have any proper investigation being done.
In a rush to curb the spread of the virus, it's understandable, experts say, that local officials might have rushed to disinfect Huanan market instead of preserving evidence. Still, China could do much more to shake off accusations of a lack of transparency, and there are calls for the WHO to be given greater powers to obtain information.
They are interfacing with their member states, and they have to abide by what the member states' wishes are. That's obviously a problem if the member state wishes not to have WHO tell others about that information. And I think we need to take a hard look at those to make sure the international health regulations, which are put in place for things like this, so we have global health security, are they able to do what we need them to do?
Unless that's addressed, the world may be no better off at defending itself against pandemics in the future. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Patrick Falk in Wuhan.
It would have been great to have a team from the US CDC and the WHO in Wuhan to determine what exactly happened. Because obviously you have to learn from the mistakes and learn from what happened there. Because if you don't learn from it, it will repeat. Biden wraps up pressure on Trump to engage. Oh, this is so unbelievable. Trump just is not acknowledging his loss and not helping in terms of the transition, which is going to hurt our country. So here is what President-elect Biden has said.
Putting up the pressure on President Trump and his administration for failing to move ahead with a peaceful transition of power. Speaking at a news conference in Wilmington, Delaware yesterday, Biden warned that more Americans will die from coronavirus if his team continues to face delays in working with current government agencies.
What do you see as the biggest threat to your transition right now, given President Trump's unprecedented attempt to obstruct and delay a smooth transfer of power?
More people may die if we don't coordinate. If we have to wait until January 20th to start that planning, it puts us behind over a month and a half. And so it's important that it be done, that there be coordination now. I am hopeful that the president will be mildly more enlightened before we get to January 20th. We're moving along knowing what the outcome will be. And as I said earlier, and I probably shouldn't repeat it, but I find this more embarrassing for the country than debilitating for my ability to get started.
Meanwhile, President-elect Biden will finally receive a national security briefing today, though no government officials will actually participate. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris instead will meet with intel, defense, and diplomatic experts because the General Services Administration continues to refuse to certify President-elect Biden's win. Let's bring in our reporters, NBC News correspondent Mike Memoli from Wilmington, Delaware, covering the Biden transition team, and NBC News correspondent Heidi Prisbilla, covering the impact of the Trump administration's delay of key transition steps. Good morning to you both. Mike, let me begin with you. President-elect Biden and his team seem to be taking the posture that everything's okay. This isn't great, but they're moving forward. The country ought to move forward with the expectation that he will be president on January 20th. But what is their sense of internal alarm about the fact that they're not getting internal briefings, that they're not having a speedy transition in a time where this coronavirus pandemic is spiking again?
Well, Willie, I think you see the Biden transition team walking a very fine line here in how they're at least messaging publicly about what this ongoing delay means. One, you see the former vice president, the president-elect, sort of speaking almost to an audience of one, something that we've seen so often during the Trump era, where he's using the word embarrassing to describe what this ongoing delay is. As you just played, saying it's more embarrassing for the country than it is debilitating for his ability to get going. He's speaking to the president. He knows the president is watching every word he says publicly. And there's a sense that the more Biden digs in and sounds the alarm himself about this, the more the president is more likely to dig in on this. And so that's why you see him trying to downplay it, even though he also very clearly sounded the alarm about what this might mean in terms of a human cost of lives not being able to work with them.
Biden's office of president-elect, they're moving forward. And hopefully one of these days soon, Trump will acknowledge he lost and will help with the transition. We can only hope. Oh, this is another thing that we need to get him out of office. He actually wanted to attack the Iran nuclear, where the nuclear power plants are one of the, he wanted to do a military strike. And fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, and his top advisors, even including Vice President Mike Pence and I believe Secretary Pompeo, warned and actually talked him off doing this. That would have caused an amazing, just a atrocious war that in the middle of the Middle East that we would have not needed.
This morning, new details about dramatic military action nearly taken by President Trump with only 2 months left in his term. ABC News has confirmed that Trump asked his senior advisors last week for options on attacking Iran's main nuclear site after a report detailed how the Iranians are increasing their stockpile of nuclear material. Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo were among the group who convinced the president not to pursue a military strike. The report coming as the Pentagon expects orders from President Trump by the end of this week to reduce troop levels in Afghanistan and Iraq by mid-January. The president tweeted back in Christmas, but the military pushed back against that plan, according to ABC's Martha Raddatz.
He will not get the full withdrawal he wanted, but this is significant. In Afghanistan, the troops will be reduced from 4,500 to 2,500, and in Iraq, reduced from 3,000 to 2,500.
This morning, some of the president's biggest allies are opposing the idea, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
A rapid withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan now would hurt our allies and delight the people who wish us harm.
And Senator Tammy Duckworth, a veteran of the war in Iraq, warns against a hasty withdrawal.
It has to be done in an orderly way. And the way this president looks like he's trying to do, he's going to order a quick drawdown. That means that we won't be able to properly remove our equipment, for example. Can you imagine leaving so quickly that you leave behind a whole caches of equipment for the Taliban to fall in on?
And before he was fired by President Trump last week, Defense Secretary Mark Esper argued U.S. troops should stay in Afghanistan until the Taliban reduces the number of attacks it's been launching. Mona?
Elizabeth, thank you.
Oh, Mr. Crazy. Thank God there's some people that talked him off the ledge there. So we're going to finish off this broadcast with a couple ads. This is a little bit older, but, you know, Trump, their campaign really spent money on frivolous stuff, flights, expensive stuff. And by the end of last month, they were being outspent by Biden in all the swing states by a margin of 3-1. So here's an ad on that in the Lincoln Project. And then we're going to go for one of the old time favorites. Get hype, go vote for Joe Biden. And it features our favorite people, President Obama and Michelle Obama. So let's finish off with these two.
Could $1 billion buy the White House?
Well, I don't think it can. It cost me billions of dollars to become president.
You know how this goes, Donald. You've done it yourself. But you're struggling.
Reports confirm that he's losing big time in the money game.
The Trump campaign squandered its $200 million cash advantage over Joe Biden.
They spent all your money.
The campaign has already had to cancel events this week.
All those consultants and pollsters, all those ads. None of it's working. They're getting rich, but you're getting ripped off.
So an enormous share of the money was just sunk into the act of raising the money.
Falling behind in the polls.
Margin here, Joe Biden consistently see ahead.
A 10-point lead, a double-digit lead for Joe Biden.
Joe Biden with a lead over President Trump.
All that money for nothing. You're paying for failure, and now it's your money they're blowing.
I'm really rich.
Much more money than we had last time, double and triple.
Can you imagine if I lost to him?
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Please welcome my husband, Joe
Biden. Former Vice President Joe Biden just released that announcement.
Joe Biden is now a 2020 presidential candidate.
Biden will enter this race as the front runner.
I know Joe. We know Joe. But most importantly, Joe knows us.
Candidates coalescing around Joe Biden.
His campaign made history.
Joe Biden has selected Kamala Harris as his running mate.
This is your campaign.
Now's the time to fight for what we believe in.
The 2020 presidential election is less than 2 months away.
The presidential race is tied.
This election is in no way predetermined, and it's going to be close.
Yeah.
We have got to vote like our lives depend on it.
I like that ad. It's very inspirational. It features our favorite President Obama and Michelle Obama. Anyway, have a great Hump Day Wednesday, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.